This is Dr. Jessica Dunn, and let's talk about corporate governance. Corporate governance refers to rules, processes, and laws by which companies are operated, controlled, and regulated. It's going to define the rights and responsibilities of the corporate participants, so the shareholders, the board of directors, officers, managers, and other stakeholders, as well as the rules and procedures for making corporate decisions. Corporate governance is influenced by both internal and external factors. Internal factors include shareholders, boards of directors, managers. External factors include customers, suppliers, competitors, and government regulations. Let's break these down. Let's first discuss internal factors. So first up are shareholders. We have different types of shareholders. We have individual investors. Those are people like you and I. We own a very small quantity of shares. They're really for our personal investment goals. Now, for us, we don't have a lot of power within a company because we're small. We don't have the ability to call up the board members and discuss corporate strategy. We can't call up the CEO and demand that they change their actions or we'll sell our stock. We have no power to enact change without selling our stock. So, individual shareholders, if they want to enact change, the only way they can do that is to sell. And that's called voting with their feet. So, they can let their opinions be known if enough people dislike what's going on and enough people collectively sell, then management's going to be thinking, wow, we've had a ton of people sell off this stock. Our share price is falling. Maybe they don't like what we're doing. Let's try to change something. Institutional investors, they do have some ability to negotiate with companies. These institutional investors are investment professionals. So they would be banks or insurance companies or mutual funds or pension funds. It's basically um, people that are paid to manage and hold large quantities of securities on the behalf of others. So your pension fund, the way that they have enough money to pay your pension to you once you retire is that they take all of these premiums that you're paying and invest them now so that later they have built up that cash and can now pay you what you have paid in. These institutional investors do have some power. They are able to exert pressure on management to perform the way that they would like. They have the ability to communicate their concerns to the board. And that's because they usually own large portions of stock. So they usually own a large block of stock. And management doesn't want to see an institutional investor sell all of that stock at once. The reason is that that would cause the share price to decline. No one wants the share price to decline. All the other investors would be angry with them. Their stock options would be worthless. So no one wants to see share prices decline. A third type of investor is called a block holder. A block holder is just a wealthy individual who owns 5% or more of a company. Um, Typically, these block holders are remnants of the founding family. So the founding family starts the company, they leave it to their kids and their grandkids, and you sometimes see that those heirs own a large block of stock that they haven't sold. And so they oftentimes, in addition to that, will have executive roles within the company. So a lot of times you see hand in hand, block holders and executives are one and the same. But they typically do have some ability to talk to executives and board members because they are of the founding family and so they know these individuals personally. External factors, these include government regulations. So any publicly traded company is going to be facing government regulations, even if it's just the SEC, just requiring companies um, to publish their private information so that investors can analyze the company and make informed decisions. That is a form of regulation. Now, if you are in specific industries, you're going to have greater regulation than other industries. But in the recent past, there have been several corporate scandals that have involved the abuse of corporate power and some criminal activity. And so, with that, Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, which we call SOX, it mandated financial disclosures with the intention of eliminating false financial disclosures and undisclosed conflicts of interest. So, if you were to look at a company's proxy statement, you would now find sections post 2002 that didn't exist before that. So, since 2002, companies have to disclose transactions, related party transactions was what they often call them in proxy statements. And basically, they have to disclose any business that they do with someone that could be seen as unfair. So, for example, you may see that um, Walmart has a large contract with Kraft Foods, and the executive of Kraft Foods is on Walmart's board. So that would have to be disclosed that Walmart is purchasing products from one of their board members. Now, obviously, in that example, that's a totally legitimate action that Walmart's purchasing Kraft brand foods and the executives on the board completely above board. But sometimes when you get into these, you might find things that are a little questionable. You could find one of my favorites was uh, it was a Walmart example, but in one of their proxy statements, they had listed that they purchased bakery items of, an excessive amount, $150,000 to $200,000 a year, bakery items from this bakery, and the bakery owner was the sister or sister-in-law of one of the executives. So, that could be questionable. It could be that maybe this bakery is the best bakery in town. They have the best prices, the best product, the best bang for your buck. But it could also be that they won this contract because of the relationship that they have with insiders. Managers, which we call agents, are hired to work for owners, which we call principals. So there is this separation of ownership and control. The shareholders of a company aren't the people in there managing it on the day-to-day basis. So, if you own shares of stock in Target, you don't do anything with the day-to-day business runnings of Target. And the problem is that these agents, these managers, may not always act in the best interest of the principals because the shareholders aren't there on a day-to-day basis making sure their business is being run correctly, that things are going smoothly, nothing's being stolen. The shareholders aren't having that control. So managers may not always act the way that they should to preserve and maximize shareholder wealth. The principal-agent relationship is an arrangement in which an agent acts on the behalf of a principal. So shareholders of a company, the principals, elect management or agents to act on their behalf. The agency problem are the problems that arise when managers place personal goals ahead of the goals of shareholders. So why do these problems exist? We often see that they're related to personal wealth, job security, or fringe benefits. So example would be that a manager is able to take a kickback if they do things a certain way, or they're able to hire a friend who isn't qualified, and that's not maximizing shareholder wealth, that's destroying it. Job security. So a manager may see that a machine could do this job a whole lot better, especially in a manufacturing setting. But if that manager chooses to install the machinery, they may put themselves out of a job because now there's no one to manage. Fringe benefits. So this is where the executives of the company may decide that it's better to have their corporate retreat in Maui as opposed to Murray, Kentucky. You get the same work done, but Maui is going to be a whole lot more fun than Murray, Kentucky. So agency problems arise when managers deviate from the goal of shareholder wealth maximization. These agency problems result in agency costs. Agency costs are just the costs that are borne by shareholders, that they're a loss of shareholder wealth because of agency problems. So examples of agency costs include lost opportunities, failing to make appropriate investment decisions, fraudulent activity, perks. Maybe you choose to fly on a corporate jet instead of taking a commercial flight. In addition to the roles played by corporate boards, institutional investors, and government regulations, corporate governance can be strengthened by ensuring that managers' interests are aligned with those of the shareholders. The way that we can do that is to structure management compensation to correspond with firm performance. We can use two methods. We can use incentive plans, which are basically stock options. These are compensation plans that tie managerial compensation to share price, so stock options. Or we can use performance plans. These tie managerial compensation to measurable things like earnings per share, or production, or output. So performance shares or cash bonuses are often used as compensation in these plans. So with performance shares, shares of stock would be awarded when performance goals are met. Cash bonuses, you simply receive cash payment when performance goals are met. Now, we think that it is better to use incentive plans as opposed to performance plans. And this goes back to the same reason we talked about why the goal of why the financial manager's goal should be to maximize shareholder wealth, because stock price cannot be manipulated, right? So when we're talking about incentive plans versus performance plans, it's not very easy to manipulate share price. So if you're tying managerial compensation to stock price, there's not a lot of things that manager can do to influence that stock price other than doing their job well. Performance plans tie managerial compensation to measurable outputs. So if it were number of units produced in a day, maybe they could set themselves up on Monday to reach outstanding numbers on Tuesday. Maybe they could do all of their pre-work and get the machine set up perfectly, so that way when they come in on Tuesday morning, they're ready to do serious output, so that way they can make record-breaking numbers on Tuesday. So it is a little bit malleable. You can directly affect this. We've seen studies too about how earnings per share can be affected, even by things that are completely out of manager's control. Your earnings per share can be driven up because a quarter may be a week longer than other quarters. So there's more performance time in there to have greater sales. So let's look at a chart here. It's from Forbes.com, and it is a couple of years old. But here we're looking at the best CEOs versus their compensation rank. Now, I can't claim that I know exactly how they measure efficiency, but it is a reputable website, so we can roll with it. The point is that high pay doesn't necessarily translate into good performance. So here we see that the most efficient CEO was Jeffrey Boyd of Priceline, compensation rank 135th. When we go down, we see that the 90th best performing CEO had the highest pay. So it doesn't necessarily translate that the highest paid CEOs are performing the best. The structure of compensation is as equally important as the amount of compensation. So you need to incentivize your managers to do their very best. And the best way to do that is through incentive plans. Another source of corporate governance is the threat of takeover. So if a company's internal corporate governance structure isn't in check, it's likely that rival managers could try to gain control of the firm. So this is a real threat, and it is a strong source of external corporate governance. So what happens is that it's basically like flipping a company. Your company is poorly run. Another company may look at that, or another investor may look at that, and they may say, I could do better. I could do a much better job. I could have that share price a lot higher. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to go in. I'm going to buy majority voting rights. So I'm going to buy a ton of shares. That way I can control what happens to this company. I'm going to come in there. I'm going to replace their board members. I'm going to hire a different CEO. I'm going to flip this company around, make it a well-performing company, increase the share price, and I'm going to make money on that. It's a true threat. It does happen. Which we'll talk about later is a reason why companies may have their boards classified where they each stand a 3-year election, because that would inhibit a hostile takeover. Because it would take 3 years to place the board members. It would take at least 2 to get majority voting in the board members that you've chosen. So it wouldn't just happen immediately.